I really wanted to just say thank you so much for taking the time out, like, to be here. This is really cool to have you on, to pick your brain a little bit and to kind of talk shop and hear your story.
Yeah.
And so I really want to know a bit more. And I feel like you've already told some of this to me before, but I want to know, like, where you got started in the industry at all. Like, because almost everyone has like some sort of life instigating turning point as to like why they choose not to just become a real estate professional, but to fully dedicate to becoming a real estate professional and treating that as their career and then soaring from there. So what was it that kind of got you into it? And if you don't mind sharing a little bit of the Cliff Notes version of like your origin story leading up to that point.
Yeah, so faith is a big part of my life. And I have always been in sales and marketing, done really well with it, worked at Coca-Cola Company, Coke North America for over 10 years, worked in a wellness company for almost that same amount of time. So this is the second career for me. And I actually had a friend who had a title and closing business, and I helped him for a little while. But I just realized, I think what was lacking in my first career was that connectivity and that opportunity to make a difference in people's lives. And I realized with title and closing, I was at the back end of the transaction. And not a whole lot you can do once someone's at the closing table and they are upset or they've had a bad experience or, they're just sad or maybe even happy. But either way, I just realized that if I got my real estate license, I could make a difference. And God prompted me, and my husband supported me, and I got my license, and 10 years later, haven't looked back.
Interesting. So was it a little bit less about like the material of the industry and more about like your ability to connect with clients a little bit sooner, like interfacing with the clients earlier on in the transaction? Like, was that more of the determining factor there?
Yeah, exactly. So I just, at closing, I was witnessing people were going through hard things. I mean, honestly, if we look at our industry, I mean, you realize that when someone calls you and they're buying a house, they're doing it because they're so excited because they just got married or they're having a baby or they just got a new job, or they're calling you to refinance because they're going through a divorce. They just lost their parents. They've got to pay for something. So, houses and purchasing a home or selling a home is tied to a big experience usually in someone's life.
Yeah, like there's emotional regulation needed. You know what I mean? Like I've heard a lot of people say, hey, when you're dealing with big dollar transactions, you naturally become a counselor.
Yes.
Because you're dealing with things that you didn't really forecast, and people end up sharing things with you, I feel like.
They do.
That you didn't forecast either.
Mm-hmm. And I don't have a therapy license, but
you feel like you should?
I feel like I should have. Yeah, I should have.
That's fair. Well, I mean, you don't really get to choose what people like say to you and how they open up.
Yeah.
And some of the things I hear, I think, are fascinating. Mm-hmm. Like how people can relate, because you're right. I feel like it's incredibly emotional.
Yeah.
And it's emotional more than the money like instigates the emotion. There's some other life event, something that's kind of triggering, and a lot of people have a lot of memories that are tied to the experience. Mm-hmm. And I see that a lot too, like how strong the emotions are at play during something like that, which can be good and bad, but having the opportunity and seeking that is really cool.
There's definitely a heaviness, a weight to the responsibility, I think, but at the same time, it's very rewarding when you make a difference and you're making a difference in someone's life. Gosh, that's my favorite part of my job. Yeah,
like nothing beats a happy closing. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Where everyone's like very grateful for you. Yeah, 100%. Where people are just so grateful for the work that you did. Mm-hmm. And you feel like if you had not established the connection with them at the beginning, that none of that would have happened.
Yeah.
That's cool, because I feel like everybody has a different reason like for getting into it.
Yeah.
And the ability to connect with clients earlier, I think, is a really encouraging one. I think that's fun. Okay, so let me ask you this. What about things that you did? Because you mentioned Coca-Cola. You mentioned working at a title agency. What about those skills, or what skills did you learn there that you were able to carry over that made you better in the real estate space? Because I feel like that's a relatively common trend, is that people get into this or something like this and really excel when it's their second career?
Yeah. I think, first of all, gosh, I think about when I started at Coca-Cola. I was so young. I was a baby.
How young?
I was 20.
Okay.
I remember the VP, the first big bash, for lack of a better word, that I went to. The VP asked why I wasn't drinking. I was so scared. I was like, I'm not old enough. And he went to my boss. He's like, why are we hiring babies? And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get fired because I'm not old enough to drink.
Oh man, yeah, it was like an incriminating response, but you're trying to be responsible.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
Oh, that sucks.
But yeah, I feel like I learned, gosh, I grew up. First of all, I learned, I saw, even though I didn't work directly, I worked more business to business. I did develop some empathy. I learned how to relate to my coworkers, seeing people who are older than me going through things, and then of course just going through life myself. Really, I learned the business aspect though. I got really good at sales and marketing, and that's what I took from those
you had
places.
that corporate foundation.
Oh yeah. So I mean,
And you can't replicate that. Like you kind of have to.
no, those
you kind
big
of have to thrust
companies.
yourself into that environment to learn it.
Yeah, those big companies, they really do training well.
And that's not just big. That's like
Really
that's
big.
a ginormous company. Yeah.
Yeah, they do. I'm still devoted to the product just because they invested so much in me. And I'm forever grateful for
That's an interesting
what
way
they
of
did.
saying that. Like you're saying that you're a bit more partial to Coca-Cola brands because
Mm-hmm.
you're grateful for how they invested in your future.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like people don't think about that a lot as consumers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's interesting. So did you do so in Alabama? Like were you a rep? Like were you more on the marketing? It sounds to me like you're a little bit more on the marketing side.
Yeah.
Did you do that here? Were you in Georgia?
Mm-hmm. So I worked for Coke North America, which is the parent company. That is the Coca-Cola company. But they had an office here in Birmingham that supported United, the local bottler. And I worked initially in the bottle can division. I'll date myself. I don't know if you remember, but the Food Worlds, Bruno's.
Oh, I remember Food World.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, it's like Faulkner University now. Mm-hmm. That big one. Yeah. I tell people that all the time. There used to be Food World, and they look at me like I'm crazy. Like they don't understand what that is.
Yeah, so that was a client that I supported. I did more data entry in the position I was in initially when I was first hired.
Okay.
But did move into more of a sales role. And then I went to Fountain Division, and that was a lot of fun. Worked with Subway, a little bit of Cracker Barrel, a little bit of everybody. But franchises, Guthrie's, yeah, we worked with them.
That's when you're really helping like distribute like the syrups that they mix with water, like in the and the machines themselves, I imagine.
Yes. So again, sales and marketing, not necessarily the one actually getting the syrup there, but we're selling the syrups
But
to
you're
the
managing the
franchisees.
relationship and making the sale.
Managing the relationships with the franchisees, giving them incentives. Remember those weird shaped cups that came in different colors? They were at a lot of convenience stores, and Subway carried them.
Was that a Coke thing?
Yeah, they were. They looked like the old timey glass, but they were plastic. It was
What
an
was
upsize
the-
program. Upsizing, I guess, is not a good thing nowadays, right?
Well, are you saying that it was a marketing effort to like sell more volume? Mm-hmm. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So they wanted to sell like
Always
larger
want
drinks.
to sell more volume.
Okay. I didn't know if it was just a matter of like each drink itself being
Yeah.
larger, or if it was trying to like portray a particular image. If it was like a status thing by having a certain cup.
Well, the cup was branded. It's a shape that obviously is very recognizable. People would associate it with the Coca-Cola, not other brands.
I got you. That's what I was curious about.
So,
Okay.
I've always been one to want to sell something that I believed in. And I think that is something. I loved my time at Coke. I would have stayed there if they did a big, huge downsizing and closed the Birmingham office. I had young kids, couldn't move to Atlanta. It didn't make sense to me to move to Atlanta. But I believed in that product, and then I went to a health and wellness company, which to me is ironically very, very different as far as the product you're selling, and believed in that too. So I don't know what I'm trying to say with that. I think what I'm trying to say is that I really, like, whatever I'm doing, I want to believe in it and believe it's in the best interest of whoever is
really
consuming
hard
it
to sell it otherwise. Because sell has such too negative of a connotation. I mean, it's a specific act. Like, you are selling a product or a service.
Yeah.
But when people hear the word sell, it kind of turns them off a little bit. And I think it's interesting because that's literally what it is. But you said something that caught my interest. You said, I don't want to sell something or even be a part of something that I don't believe in.
Right.
So my question to you there is, as a real estate professional, how do you handle a circumstance where you're representing someone, and this could be a seller, this could be a buyer, but you have a hard time believing that what they want is really the best thing for them, yet you also feel duty bound to do that because they believe it's the best thing for them. How do you manage that?
How do you manage your 2-year-old?
I
That
don't.
is your answer.
Yeah, I
Oh,
don't.
you don't.
I try to. I feel like I am, but I'm probably not.
Well, I think that's it. I think I'm really big on education, so I'm going to tell them the truth. I am going to make sure that they know all the facts. But my clients are grown adults; they get to make their own decisions, and sometimes I'm ecstatic and I feel like they're making a great decision. Sometimes I know that they're making a bad decision, but it's still their decision. So
Yeah, so it's like at a certain point, like, what can you do?
right,
Like, if it's predicated on education, let me arm you with all the information you need to make
right,
an intelligent decision for you. Like, whatever that happens to me, because that might not be an intelligent decision for me.
right.
Because I feel like there can be a detriment in putting yourself in their shoes too much, because you want to make sure that you're servicing their interests and you're doing that well. But I would find that difficult, if someone is really wanting to do something, and the reason why I would find it difficult is I would not want that person looking at me later and talking to me later and being like, why didn't you tell me?
Yeah.
Like, why didn't you say something about this? I feel like you can't really do much more than like to warn them and try to educate them.
Yeah. And, I do. And I think that sometimes, people make bad choices. And I think that what you do afterwards when they realize they've made a mistake is everybody makes mistakes. And it's okay. You can come back from it. You can learn from it. You can grow from it and not make it next time. So, I have a lot of first-time home buyers that after they buy their first house, a lot of times they're like, okay, I am going to look at the age of the roof. I am going to look at the HVAC. You told me about this. And, so I think that, they learn from it and they appreciate you not condemning them if they do make a bad choice. I like to think that most of my clients make pretty good decisions, so I tend to over-educate.
Which is good. I mean, you'd rather,
Yeah.
if it's a matter of like retaining clientele and serving your people in accordance with your brand, I would imagine that you would prefer to over-educate, even if that did somehow, some way cost you business. I'd be surprised if it did.
Yeah.
But it would be really rough if you were trying really hard to retain business or earn business, and the way to do that would be to educate them less. That could get really rough on the backside, and it could kind of like damage the transaction and the feeling that the buyer or the seller has, like, at the end of the day. You know what I mean? Because I feel like, going back to what we were talking about earlier, people operate off of feeling so much, like it matters.
Yeah.
And they walk away and they'll remember that forever. Like, the good memories that I have in the business stick, but so do the bad ones, know? And so it can get tricky either way.
So what about from your perspective? Like, I know you're not out there with the client. I'm out there with the client. I'm showing them the house. How do you feel like your role, like, when do you see that, hey, this is maybe not the greatest idea? I guess on your side, you're looking at their finances and you're saying, oh my goodness, they might be stretching themselves too thin, or this house really is could possibly be a detriment to them.
It's a really good question. And I think that I have both the blessing and the curse of abiding by guidelines. because it can't be just an art. It always has to be a little bit of a science.
Yeah.
But you kind of have to feel it out and put the puzzle pieces together, because there could be a very real circumstance, and this happens all the time, when someone shows a certain level of income, and I'm confident in their income, in their earnings capacity, but the way that they make money might not actually give them the most amount of buying power. So if I look at something like that and I determine that, hey, this couple that is wanting to qualify for this home, they have really strong real life ability to pay bills. And I'm seeing it. I'm seeing the proof of it. But I am less confident that they are going to be able to get the home that they want or have an easy transaction that they're hoping for. This is either going to be something that they can't do, or it's going to be very rocky, like all the way through. We like to call them hairy loans. Like, it's going to be tricky all the way through. And so part of my educational capacity at the beginning is saying, hey, there are ways we have to structure this to give us the best shot. And then I always want to speak in levels of confidence. So this is something that I am willing to try with you, although very tight. So only if we structure it this way and recognizing these contingencies and these variables are we going to be able to get there. Or, hey, this looks very, very clean. This is really on the opposite end of the spectrum. I mean, hey, this is really, really clean. The way that we shake this out is just a matter of preference.
Yeah.
Like, that would be somebody who has a really easy qualification. And almost always, if someone has a lot of room in their qualification numbers, there's a lot of room in the real life numbers too. But it can work the other way around when you have something that's like not as clean on paper. Like, so if someone is self-employed, and not a lot of people understand what self-employed like actually means when you look at the paperwork. And so if someone is self-employed and making a lot of money, and we have a strong track record of that, well, if they haven't been doing it for quite long enough, that could really get in the way of qualification, even though I know from a series of deposits that they're looking really strong. So do we consider a different loan program to put them in? Do we stay with the baseline program that's a little bit more vanilla and perhaps more affordable? All of those things go into it. But I'm typically looking at the guidelines to say, hey, like, okay, well, let's look at in terms of qualification, number one, and then let's also talk the numbers to make sure you're comfortable with that, number two. And very similar to what you said, if they're comfortable with what that looks like and they feel like they have redundancy, then they're able to make that informed decision.
Yeah.
And I don't want to ever make that decision for them. Like, I want to be like, hey, here's what it looks like. Do you like this? Because if you don't, we have options. Like, we can tweak it. You know, it's like a seesaw effect. The more you bring to the table at closing, the less your payment is, and vice versa on most occasions. So I feel like it can get really, really complicated very, very fast.
Yeah.
And I am very much guilty of talking to people too much about some of the more complicated factors. You know, at the end of the day, as somebody told me this one time, they said they don't appreciate answers to the questions that they don't ask. So it's very easy to talk about it so much to the point where you convolute things.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like sometimes I will say something 4 or 5 times and then they'll say, you never told me. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I did.
And you feel like you might need to put it in writing, you know, just to justify yourself.
And I do. What do you think? Because I feel like sometimes the real estate agent and the lender get to be good cop, bad cop. I get to show them all the pretty houses, and you get to say no. What do you think about that scenario, or that in itself, but also how people feel about their buying power now versus a few years ago? Because I have clients whose friends chose to purchase, you know, when interest rates were crazy low, and they're looking at their friend who bought a $750,000 house, and they're like, we make the same money. Why am I only qualifying for a $500,000 house? Which, you know, praise God, you're qualifying for a $500,000 house. But what does that look like for you?
That's a really good question. And there are a few parts to that.
Yeah.
I think up until recently, this is still going on to some degree, but especially over the past year, and maybe even tracing back to the back half of 2022, I feel like people are looking at 3 factors in home affordability. They're looking at mortgage rates, and that's been a hot button topic ever since rates were on maybe the most rapid growth curve they've ever been on in recorded history in 2022.
Yeah.
And then you have insurance costs, which people don't seem to talk about as much as a consumer population until they're in a transaction. But that's, if I might say, that's the most significant. And then you have the actual price of the home itself, which even if it doesn't grow as much as we experienced in 21 and 2022 and 2025 year over year, there's still an estimated pace of home price growth that's keeping pace with inflation. Like some people are estimating around 4%. So at the end of the day, home prices will just naturally be a little bit more because we're in the next year. Now, there are certain times where that doesn't happen, but overall, you're going to have at least a tiny increase in the value of the home. The other thing with interest rates is that a lot of people don't understand why rates are where they are and why they're staying where they are. Because who are really the ones who are telling you that rates are going to get lower? I would say sales professionals in the space, consumers who want to believe that it's true, and economists who are paid to predict but are not held to their prediction.
Right.
Like there's no detriment if they're wrong. Now, the Fed operates differently. So they're looking at this, I've heard it described to me as a little bit more of like an attorney mindset. And so they look at this from data. They look at jobs reports. They look at inflation.
Yeah.
And interest rates better follow risk and fear and inflation versus recession on a sliding scale than they do anything else. So I literally had somebody the other day say to me, oh, well, in 2025, we feel like after the inauguration of President-elect Trump, we're going to have an increasing economy. We feel confident of the policy, and we feel like rates are going to go down. I've had people say that to me before.
That's nice.
Yeah, and I'm like, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
But I don't get it, because while that could be true, and I'm not here to say like, oh, this is never going to work. I don't know.
Yeah.
But if the economy only grows in strength on paper, then I would argue that bond investors are going to be a little bit more worried about inflation than they are recession.
Yeah.
And the more bond investors are worried about inflation, the more rates are going to maintain their high pace or place rather, or perhaps increase. So this is where it gets tricky, because people are like, oh, well, I want rates to get low again. I want the lower rate. And they hear things like the 2.75, the 3, the 3.25%. And I think the people in your industry and my industry and anyone who's in that home buying column is probably getting a little bit peeved about it, because it's anomalous. It doesn't exist. Like, what are the two windows of superior rates that you have heard about, like in your adult life? I would probably say the 2008 crash and the COVID market.
Yeah.
Both of which there was a heavy fear of recession. And so rates cranked down like crazy to kind of promote the economy, to combat that a little bit. But the economy was in the dumps at that time, and there was a lot of other fear. So jobs reports have to be really low, and people have to be really scared about making money, and the economy has to be in a really bad position for rates to be low. And most people don't have buying power during those times. Or if they do, it's heavily degraded because of what they're going through. Or for a temporary period of time, they might not be eligible to buy a home because they might have lost their job. And so people want their cake and to eat it too. And it's literally economically unfeasible to want something like that, because it just doesn't exist. And it's really, really scary. I don't think people are thinking about it like that. And the best thing that people can do is recognize the fact that between 23 and 24, homeowners insurance went up by 22% in average cost around the country. They had vengeance pricing because they were going out of business. And people say, well, I don't understand. I've never had a claim. I was talking to an insurance broker friend of mine last night. I never had a claim. Why is this not, why is this not staying where it was, or why is it not lower? And people don't understand that insurance is pooled. And the more you have floods, tsunamis, and wildfires, the more your prairie home in the middle of the country is still getting whacked in insurance costs, because you're asking for somebody, an investor really, to invest in the insurance of your property, but they can only provide that because they're insuring so many others as well that are in a more disaster prone area that can be bad for you.
Yeah.
And so all of those things are going up, and what people don't want to hear is this is the new normal.
Yeah. And also, I equate it to the value of your home too. People will call me and they'll be like, I actually talked to a client not too long ago, and he was like, my taxes and my insurance have just gone up so much. Why? You didn't prep me for that, which again, education, I always try to tell them what I know, but I didn't realize at the time that things were going to go up as much as they were. And I'm like, your home is worth twice what you bought it for at this point in time. Of course, The government's going to want a piece of that. And insurance companies, if your house burns down and they have to rebuild it, it's going to cost twice as much as what originally they thought it was going to cost. So,
And that's happening. I know that people don't want to talk about that, but people are losing their homes to just random accidental fires, and they can't build back their home because they're also not accounting for updated build prices.
Yeah.
Like materials are more expensive too. When one thing goes up, almost everything goes up.
Yeah.
And that's what's scary about it. That goes back to that inflation point of the conversation that we were having before.
Yeah.
So how often do you see someone enters the market, they're excited to enter the market because they want to buy a house, they are quickly like dissuaded, they lose enthusiasm because of how expensive things may be? Do you see like a natural rebound? Do people come around rather quickly? Are you seeing some fallout? Like, what does it look like from your perspective?
I think expectations can be hard. I think they were hard last year. I think people have a little bit better of I think people have a more realistic expectation now than they did 12 months ago.
Okay.
So I do think there's still people that need to be educated and need to understand. I think my biggest struggle is probably the same one that you just talked about, is people are so fixated on interest rates and hoping that they're going to get better. I'm going to wait to buy a house. I'm going to wait to sell a house until it gets better. And I think that we may get a little bit better rates this year. I say that very cautiously, but not like a whole point.
Right.
I don't
right.
think we're going
like a slow
to see
decline.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see. If we see fives, I would be surprised. I would be very surprised. But what I try to educate people and what I try to make them understand is kind of what you said, is now is the time to buy. Be in a house, be in a good position, be in a house that you can afford now at your current salary. And then if rates go down, refinance, and then you're going to be in an even better situation. If you wait to buy until rates get better, number one, you're going to be paying a mortgage, or not a mortgage, rent until then. So you're kind of, I wouldn't say wasting your money, because sometimes renting is a good option for people, but you're going to be waiting until everyone else joins the buyer pool. And then you're going to overpay for a house. You're going to have less opportunity to do inspections.
That's a good point.
It's going to be harder to find a home. And it's hard now. It's hard now to find a home. So I think that that's the thing that people have people in their ears saying, oh, well, I got my house and my interest rate was 3.25. You need to just wait until it gets back down to 3.25. It's not going to happen. And like you said, if it does happen, you're probably not going to want to be buying right then, because something terrible has happened to cause the rates to drop.
You've got to be in a certain kind of powerful position, like socioeconomically, I think, to be able to play ball in that market and to invest in the market if it goes down. For your average consumer who's trying to achieve that dream of home ownership, they're in a different bucket. And that can be hard, because piggybacking off of what you just mentioned, you're going to have a really hard time qualifying and buying if so many economic factors otherwise are working out of your favor. Because there could be like a market crisis, like an economic crisis that would create rates to go low. I think the treachery is in expectation and people thinking that is more normal.
Yeah.
Than like the normalized rates that you're mentioning being a bit more normal. Because when has it ever been the case that, hey, what happened for a 2-year period is what's going to happen forever? And I don't want to be, you mentioned good cop, bad cop earlier. I don't want to be the naysayer, because there's a matter of bracing people for proper expectations, but also people are still needing to move, to buy, to sell. Like sometimes they can't wait on the market. And the more, somebody said this to me the other day, the more this goes on and the more people wait, the more time passes, naturally, the more people are going to play ball.
Yeah.
Because you just can't wait anymore.
Right.
And it makes me think of, I'm going to go to a Star Wars reference here. It makes me think of Star Wars and the new trilogy with Rey. And several characters in that new trilogy say, you already know the truth. You know you're waiting for your parents. You know you're waiting for people who aren't there.
Yeah.
And I think more people in the housing market are realizing I'm waiting for something that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Like I'm waiting for conditions that no
Aren't
one's
gonna
really promising, and they may not ever happen.
Yeah.
But your point was interesting. You know, if they do happen and you have landed the property, take a crack to improve your scenario, but always weigh the cost to see whether or not that's really worth it for you.
Yeah. I think, and that's one of the benefits we have being in the industry is we have seen all the scenarios. We've seen years of what the market can look like and what you need to do in each market and the benefits of each market, because there is a benefit to buying right now. And that's what I'm trying to educate people about. You can get seller concessions. You can possibly, you can buy with a VA loan. I couldn't get someone to qualify with a VA loan. I could get them qualified. I couldn't get them to purchase because
It makes me so sad.
I know it is sad, but when someone has 20 offers and 3 of them are cash offers and will pay over appraised value, I mean, what are you going to go with as a seller?
Right.
And now the sellers are getting one offer, maybe 1 or 2 offers, or maybe they're sitting on the market for 60 days because they're not completely move-in ready. And you can go in and you can buy with different types of financing. You can ask for seller concessions. You can negotiate. Now, it's not a crazy market. I would call it a normal market because my sellers are still doing pretty well. I had a seller this past fall get multiple offers on their house. They were able to sell above asking price. But even that, the buyer was still able to perform a home inspection. And it's scary to think that people were spending $300, $400 more on a home and not even have a home inspection.
Yeah, they're like completely bypassing that.
Yeah.
That is a really scary phenomenon.
You get to do a home inspection.
But it was happening a lot, like a horrible byproduct of a competitive market, that was so heavily skewed to like seller benefit. Interesting. Okay, so do you feel like in the market that we have been experiencing lately over the past month or more, that there are certain homes that are impervious to market conditions because of their neighborhood? Like you mentioned, one of your clients, one of your sellers had multiple offers and sold above asking price. Is that because of the neighborhood or region that home was in? And are other ones that are in other areas, and I don't know what areas those are those sitting for longer because of where they are, or is it more because of price point? Is it both? What do you think?
That is a great question. And for me, what I have seen is the current buyer pool is not people who are moving just to get a lake house or moving because they want more space. The current buyer pool are moving because they need a new home and it's their first time home buying and they don't want to live in an apartment anymore.
It's not conditions based like what you were talking about before, like market conditions.
People aren't moving just because they have $100,000 equity in their home. So the buyer pool that we're seeing right now is a younger generation that tends to be the ones buying right now. And what I see is they want move-in ready. So the people who have updated their homes, or they have their house just everything done to it. It just looks fantastic. It doesn't have to be completely updated, but it has to be move-in ready.
Do you think that's a convenience thing?
I do. I think I don't even know if I really want to say this out loud here.
Rip it, Carrie.
I think that the younger generations don't have vision, or they want it now. They don't want to fix it up. I mean, I do have the occasional person who says, "Oh, I want a fixer-upper," but those are so far and few between these days. Most people are like, "I want the Pinterest-worthy kitchen."
Pinterest-worthy.
Yeah, I want they want the things that are already fixed up, and the people who have deferred maintenance, the people who have life and are busy and have never updated their kitchen, they've never felt the need to update their kitchen, they're the ones that are sitting on the market.
Well, you would think that people who have a little bit of an investor mindset, beyond those who are just actually investors, and even sellers who aren't in a time crunch, would be licking their chops at that, because wouldn't they get a pretty good return off of the improvements they make before listing the home if they knew that the buying pool wanted something move-in ready?
So, in my opinion, the investors are skewed because of the past few years too. You have a buyer who's been in the market, or they've been in their house 3 to 5 years. They want to make X number of dollars on their home. And right now, which I think we'll get there. I think we'll get there for the investors. But right now, those buyers are wanting X number of dollars for their home, and the investors aren't wanting to pay. They're wanting to turn around and fix it and make a certain percentage on it. And those, gone are the days where they bought a house for $200,000, put some work into it, and by the time they go to list it, it's worth $50,000 than what they thought it was going to be worth when they bought it. So
I feel like there's not much more of a gut punch in buying and selling real estate when you have to sell a home for less than what you bought it for.
Yeah. But
horrible feeling.
That used to be the norm. I mean, the early 2000s, after 2008, someone would be so excited for someone to write a contract on their house. I got to write a check for $10,000. That's okay. I'm getting to unload my house. And, there used to be a time, Thomas, where you had to get proof of funds from the seller.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yes.
It's just very different than what transpired, 14, 13 years later.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I also feel like I am observing more home sale contingencies than I'm used to seeing. What are your thoughts on that?
Again, I think that's a normal market, and I'm very excited about that because nothing is worse. 2 years ago, I would be like, "Hey, Thomas, I'm so excited that y'all want to buy another house, but what we need to do is we've got to sell your house. You've got to figure out a place to live when we search for you a house. And I can't guarantee you're going to get the first, second, or third house that you write an offer on. I'm going to do my best to help that happen. But the reality is that if you write it contingent on the sale of your home, you're just going to miss out every single time because there's at least 5 offers on every single home. So the fact that...
And you're thinking, not today.
Yeah. Now someone can write an offer. Now, I think in the spring it'll be harder because there's still very low inventory. But to be able to say, hey, especially a move-up buyer, to write a contingency, I've got a listing right now that's in Hoover.
I have a question on that. Is that somebody who's upgrading their property?
Yeah, move-up buyer. Let's say you bought a cute little 3-2 cottage home, and now you're on kid number 3. You've got to have more space.
Busting at the seams.
You need a bonus room. So I have a great house that's going to be going on the market this spring, and I told them to list early spring because they're a move-up house. The house is 5 bedrooms, has a full unfinished basement, bonus room, just tons of space. Perfect move-up home, great school system. And that's what I've prepped that seller. I'm like, you're going to get an offer that's contingent on the sale of a smaller home because you're a move-up house. And, that's why we want to list early so that your potential buyer can turn around and list their house in the spring and sell their house.
But God, I love them when they work.
Yeah.
I know that they're designed to work.
Not too many layers.
Yeah, I know that they're designed to work, so I don't want to make it sound like I'm surprised when they do. Mm-hmm. But God, they're so powerful. It's amazing, like how a lot of that works because you roll over your net proceeds to support the next purchase, and it's a wonderful thing that kind of creates a little bit of a seamless process. And I do recognize that it is a bit more convenient and perhaps more powerful in the offer making process if you've already sold, and then you have that already banked to support your next purchase, so it's not really a home sale contingency. But not everyone lives in this magic fairy tale world where they have family that they can live with for a few months.
Correct.
Right. you never know, and you also don't know
place for their dog.
Yeah, their dog, their kids, their stuff, let alone themselves. And I think it's interesting. So In the local market, I'm really curious to know where are you seeing like markets or areas that are affected by local changes, like these acute changes to the market that you're talking about? Perhaps home sitting, perhaps more seller concessions, perhaps more home sale contingencies, people coming around to a little bit more of a balanced market, like a little bit more in the middle between the sliding scale of buyer and seller spectrum, versus those neighborhoods where you feel like no matter what, it's still crazy and it's still heavily skewed toward seller authority.
I think convenience is still very important. I think in COVID and the years after, everybody was working at home. And so people moved out further away from the city. They moved a little further away from conveniences.
That's a good point.
And now they're having to go back to work. They're having to go back into an office. Their kids are in Little League again, and all of a sudden that commute to the ballpark that is now a 30 to 40 minute commute is getting old.
And traffic hasn't gotten better.
No, traffic is
It's gone
not.
awful.
Yeah. So I think we had people went further out in order to be able to get a house, and they weren't concerned about it. And now those people are wanting to move closer in and their house that's further out is a little harder to sell. I think communities and schools.
Is this because, like, for the same reason they want to move out of that house, the same reason why other people wouldn't want to buy the house?
Yeah.
Is that the problem?
I think so. I think
Okay.
you still have people working from home. You have new buyers that are willing to do, new home buyers who are willing to do the commute. But I think more people are choosing better convenience. I think, so I think the neighborhoods that are convenient to, home, say that word a few too many times, but I think that homes that are close to restaurants, close to shopping, close to entertainment, close to schools and activities, those always do well.
I'm always curious. Like, hearing you say that makes me ask the question, are you surprised? And have you ever been surprised over the course of your career at how buyers can have tunnel vision, how short-sighted people can be? Because it's easy in hindsight, sitting here in these chairs talking about it with the luxury of a private conversation, thinking, why would somebody buy something that works for the COVID market as if they expected the COVID environment to last forever? You know what I mean? Like, to think that you're always going to work from home. Now, I know people did go on permanent, remote work statuses, but
Yeah.
like just the way that the community works and schools and the opening of stores and restaurants and everything else, I find it a little bit surprising that people would not forecast some sort of return to normalcy when making a home purchase. Maybe there's more to it than that I'm not.
We
I'm
were
not
in a
thinking about.
pandemic. I don't think any of us knew what the future held. I think we all
That's
had
fair.
hopes
That's
and
fair.
dreams. But, I think that you had a lot of people. I mean, if I heard it once, I heard it 20 times. If I get stuck at home, I'm going to at least be stuck at home with a personal gym. If I get stuck at home, I'm going to at least be stuck at home on a lake, So
Everybody wanted to upgrade that home status because they're going to be in home a lot more.
And now you have people who have gym equipment and they go to the gym now because everything's open and they love the community, which I find fantastic. I think
Yeah.
that you do need
You're gonna have cabin fever.
community. Yeah. People who have a lake house and they love it, but it's a 45-minute commute to downtown Birmingham, and that's not conducive to a daily commute. And they're like, So I think that was an anomaly. I think that was not that we couldn't have a pandemic again, but I do think that, I don't think it was short-sighted. I think people were like making the best of the situation and their buying power at that point in time.
Yeah, that's true. Because they had a lot of optionality. Sometimes it's just where you could land a contract, I think.
Yes, that was true too. Yeah.
Like, hey, we just need to be somewhere, period. Like, whatever we can get to kind of support our family's needs.
Yeah.
Do you pay much attention to the rental market? Like, do you invest in that or represent anybody or? help
I
people with.
don't. Do you have any insight into the rental market? Please share.
Well, my question was about like short-term rentals and even investors that are buying property for short-term rentals. I feel like over the past couple of years, there's been I guess a lot of fear, like in the data of people having a short-term, mid-term rental. You know, maybe even things that are not specifically branded Vrbo and Airbnb that are just becoming a little bit more of a drag than they are that profitable promise that someone gave the current owner or that the current owner had built into their business plan.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know if you'd heard anything about people being less enthusiastic about mid or short-term rentals now versus a couple of years ago.
I haven't, but going back to, there was probably more of a need for it because of, like we said, people would have to sell. They'd need a place to live for 2 or 3 months. In addition to the normal people who would use a short-term rental. I think that the need is not as great for those. So yeah, I think that's probably my only thoughts on it. I really, going back to my why, I'm so passionate about helping people. I kind of stay in that lane that investors, people will come to me all the time and they're like, we want to buy rentals. We want to do this. Great. I want to help you. I want to support you. I want to connect you with somebody who can help you with that. I'll help you as long as you know I'm not an expert, but it's not a passion. It doesn't get me up in the mornings.
Okay, I'm glad you said that. It sounds to me like you're so much more interested, like in your book of business and representing people who are buying their primary residence than you are people who are wanting to buy a property for investment purchases or purposes.
Yeah.
Why is that? Like, can you talk a little bit more about the differences between those populations? Like, what do you see, like the traits of people who are buying as investors versus families who are trying to buy their home? What are the differences, and why do you like representing families so much more?
Which I feel like investors can be easier. It's the emotional process. I want to take someone on a journey and I want to see that they have made a difference in their family. Now, investment can make a difference. I have some clients who are currently purchasing rentals and creating generational wealth for their families, and I think they're doing it very wisely. And I'm excited for them, but it's not, I don't know what to say other than it's a relationship type thing for me, and it's helping someone in a big moment. And even though sometimes a lot of my clients, it's, hey, I've just moved into town, I still feel like I'm making a difference. I'm connecting them with people. I'm helping them get in a part of town that fits with their lifestyle. And an investor, I get that I'm helping someone, but for some reason it feels like it's about money, and that just doesn't get me up in the morning.
I got you. It puts the focus in a different bucket, and I feel like you don't have that same ability to connect. There's a different emotional pull.
Yeah.
I get that. Okay.
I want to make all this money on this house. I'm like, great.
Okay. I want to ask you a yes or no, true or false question,
Okay.
and want your opinion.
Okay.
Or rather, I'm going to make a statement and want to know what you have to say about it.
All right.
Your home, your primary residence that you live in, is not an investment. What say you?
It is an investment.
Okay, why?
It's investment in my family. It's investment in my legacy. It's investment in my marriage. So it is an investment. And I do want to make money off of it. I personally look at how much my house is worth probably every couple of months. But
I bet it's kind of like people checking their stock portfolio. They kind of want to see where it's at and what it can do.
So I don't know, you probably don't do this with your home, but literally I will be showing a client, we can't find them anything. And David will be like, you know what house is perfect for them? And I'm like, we're not selling. Just look on the MLS, see if there's anything that we would like. No, we're not
That's
selling.
funny.
People think I want to move. My husband, he wants to make money off our house. I don't want to move.
Do you believe that your home is an asset?
Yes.
Okay.
But again, I think, what does asset mean to somebody?
That's it. That's the magic question, is what is the definition?
Yeah.
Because I read things and I listen to things and I enjoy multiple perspectives. Almost everyone for the past 20 plus years loves turning back to Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right? Where in that book, he says, your home, I believe he says your home is not an asset, but he may have said your home is not an investment. And that's why I wanted to ask you those things, because if you listen to something like the Bigger Pockets podcast, which a lot of real estate investors, specifically investors, like to listen to, they disagree with that notion. They think that your home is an investment. And going off of Rich Dad, Poor Dad's definition of an asset is something that makes money. So Robert Kiyosaki, as the author, his argument is your primary residence is not an asset because it doesn't make money. Anything that holds investment value, has some sort of benefit as an investment, but it's not an asset if it's not making money for you. Versus if you have a home that you rent to somebody else, it is ideally making money every month. So it is an asset. But everyone has a different, I can't speak today, different definition of asset, and often a different definition of what a liability is.
Mm-hmm. So what's your thoughts on your house?
I think that your home is only an investment as much as it is resellable. If I'm looking at it exclusively financially, you talked about things that are less tangible, less financial. I think that's valuable, because that's really why some people have certain houses in the way that they've done it. Our house, completely family oriented. It was something that my wife wanted, that my wife designed. She and her dad built it. Cool. I'm happy because it more than fits my needs, but it makes them really happy. It makes my wife and my family really happy. Right. So that works for me. I like that. But if I were going and shopping in the market for a resold home, I would probably, just with the way I like to look at things, be looking at what the resale value is. Could we do a live-in flip, even if that's not too aggressive of a flip? Because I think that, yes, I can easily justify the fact that it's an investment, but I don't think it's an asset unless I really believe in my heart of hearts that we're going to sell it.
Yeah.
And until that point where it's right for sale, then cool. You look at that giant Elvis Presley driveway home in Mount Laurel, that Health South one, you know what I'm talking about? It's how much of a bad investment was that? And then also, how much is it perhaps not an asset? Because can anybody ever really make money off of that in the interim? Or could they even make money when they sell it? If both the answers are no, then not only is it a bad investment, probably a bad asset.
Yeah.
But I don't really think that the answer to that question is so clean as to whether or not it's a investment property or primary residence. I think it has a lot more to do with what you bought it for, what it generates, what it does for you and your family, how it accumulates, and how that grows in value, and then the likelihood of sale or making money in the future. Because one of the best things that anybody can do in their home buying journey and building up their portfolio, so to speak, is to buy a primary residence. And then you mentioned the concept of the step-up buyer. If they upgrade, but they retain that property, if they can, I know it's hard to do, but if they can retain that property as a rental, and I see it a lot in military culture, especially with couples where both members of the couple are VA eligible, then they buy Station 1, they buy Station 2, they buy Station 3, and then they retire and buy their quote-unquote forever home. And now they're renting out 3 properties and building equity all around the board. And you can't say that's a bad investment.
So I won't say it's a bad investment, but I think of it as a lot of debt. And I think that's just
true.
The generation that I grew up in. Debt is bad. Debt is scary.
I think that's accurate. That's a lot of debt.
And you're bringing in income, but what are you responsible for if the market ever tanked? You have all these homes
have baggage
that are empty, and so that would terrify me personally. I would not want to do that. But going back to the asset or an investment, I think looking at the home that David and I purchased. When we bought it as a realtor, I looked at it through the lens of, could I sell it? What would I need to do to make more money on it? So I always look at my home through that lens because of my career, and I can't unsee those things.
Yeah, well, you want to be able to justify the purchase too. You want to feel good that you're making a sound decision.
Yeah. But when you asked, is it an investment? Is it an asset? I think of it as a place of being home where my kids had a place to lay their head, where we can host small group, we can host baby showers, we can host wedding showers. It's an asset because if a friend is in a crisis, we have a place that they can stay. And so I think of it as an asset because it's always giving, and it's always...
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about earnings capacities. It's about what you can offer to people beyond just money.
Right.
That's powerful. That's powerful because there's a utility cost component too. Like, what does it mean to you? Is it something that you enjoy having, that you enjoy using? Like, that's a real concept, and I think that holds immense value.
And those are I guess at the end of the day, that's the person I want to work with. Someone who their home is a home. It's not just a house.
I love that.
So yeah, but at the same time, totally can make some money off my house if I sold it tomorrow. And it is a commodity, and if I needed to, I'm not so attached to it that I would be sad, but I'm not so attached to it that I wouldn't let it go for a greater good.
Probably the healthiest way to be.
Yeah.
That you're confident in that, it could happen if the right situation came about or if you needed to.
Yeah.
But
my
you're
husband made me
not in a hurry. Yeah. I love that. We've been going for a while, and this conversation is amazing. And I want to be respectful of your time. But I want to know what information you can provide to anyone listening to this, how they can get in contact with you.
Let's see. What's the best way to get into contact with me? I would say archhoover.com, archhoover.com is my website. You can always catch me there. And then Carrie and Hoover is my tag on Instagram. So you can always find me there.
Carrie and Hoover, Carrie. And that's Carrie Richardson.
Yes.
Man, I love this. I really appreciate your insights and the conversation. I thought your energy was fantastic, and I hope that we can do it again, so I appreciate it.
Thanks, Thomas. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Bye, guys.
Bye.